Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Today we're gaining insights into building a strong foundation for lifelong commitment, communication, trust, and mutual growth. The keys to a happy and healthy relationship. We're talking about premarital workshops, we're talking about relationship goals, love, and learning. Today's guest is a counseling psychologist with a master's degree from the University of KwaZulu Natal. He is the founder of Soulful Psychology and works with Gift of the Givers. His areas of expertise include mood disorders, depressive disorders, anxiety disorders, relationship difficulties, marital challenges, and bereavement, corporate wellness, and preventive care. He aims to promote healthier relationships, cope with grief and loss, and foster resilience and optimism. He offers private consultations and is committed to empowering individuals to navigate life's challenges. To all our viewers and listeners out there, this is the one and only brother Mohammed Uzair Bhamjee. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, brother, and welcome to the What We Want podcast.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure being on your show.
Jazakallah for making the time for us. I know you've been hectic, but Alhamdulillah, we're here again. Brother Mohammed, I've touched a little bit on, on your introduction, a bit on your bio, but, not very often do we come across male psychologists. Okay, for me, I don't know many male psychologists. I know lots of female psychologists, but, could you just share with us a little bit more about yourself and about your practice and your specialities?
Okay, so basically, I completed my master's degree at UKZN. I also studied at the Northwest University, NWU, Potchefstroom, and the Vaal campuses, which was phenomenal. Alhamdulillah, I really, really, really enjoyed my experience at um, the versatile experience rather by moving from different institutions and so forth. And then I was in the military, and in the military, I completed my internship and so forth. And basically, a lot of what I know is due to the military. And after that, I was with Gift of the Givers. So actually, in between my masters, with my masters, I was still with Gift of the Givers, and occasionally, and they had come in. But once I was in the military, and even post that, I decided to go full on with Gift of the Givers until I was encouraged to actually open up my practice. After a lot of consultation with various people, specifically with Dr. Imtiaz as well, he then told me, Zair, you should open up your practice. Go for it. And
Alhamdulillah.
yeah, that's basically gave me a lot of motivation, a lot of insight as to the benefits of having a practice, as well as the obviously we know psychologists in general in the country. There's a shortage. Mental health is a pandemic on its own. It's an issue. It's in terms of resources. Mental health is not an issue, but the resources rather is an issue. And when we look at it from a male perspective, there is a shortage of males in the country in terms of male psychologists. And then if you broaden it down further in terms of Muslim male psychologists, there's even a greater shortage. So yeah, that's basically where we are in terms of how I work. I think you've what I work with rather you've covered it. In terms of how I work a lot from a brain working recursive therapy point of view. It's the short of it is called BWRT, where we, in a nutshell, where we rewire the brain um, to think more clearly, to be more productive, identify where the virus actually is, and deal with that particular virus and process trauma, process data in the brain. So ultimately, we process that by taking files and putting it into folders so that your computer, your brain is a lot more effective, a lot more efficient.
Okay. Alhamdulillah. So that's more like when you say we, is they like a team of
So
psychologists?
at the moment, no, I don't have a team that work under me. I have a team that work with me. So a lot of the people I refer to um,
Okay.
are all, not all, but most of them work from a brain working recursive therapy point of view, from a BWRT point of view. A lot of the time, it aligns with how we work, the modalities that we work with, and so forth. So that I mean, sometimes we don't all work on. It's not only one person working on a case at times, depending how it is. Sometimes there's various individuals that are there, and depending on the nature of it, for example, there may be a traumatic event that happens, such as a hijacking or a shootout or whatever it may be. So when I refer to that, then I'm not the only one that would work with every single person. There'd be other colleagues that I'd work with. So yeah,
All
when it
right.
comes to mainly when it comes to trauma processing, BWRT is the way.
I've been following you a bit on social media, and I gravitate towards, those who advocate for Palestine. And with regards to your line of work, like, what are your advice when it comes to mental health regarding Palestine?
So obviously, a mental health shortage is there as well. They aren't they're unable to actually seek that much of help. I mean, if you look at the amount of people that are affected there versus the amount of help that is available, apart from your basic needs, I mean, your psychological
Mm,
basic needs are not met. How on earth would the psychological needs be met? So we often focus on the Palestinians that are obviously affected, and it's something that's correct. We should be focusing on it. However, we downplay the fact that there's secondary exposure to trauma that we have, and something I often see in my practice that we don't always hear people speak about, but is that that impact of the trauma just by watching maybe YouTube clips or things on social media, Instagram,
mm,
TikTok, whatever it may be. Um, and that exposure is traumatic enough where sometimes you find people unable to sleep, unable to think clearly, severe breakdowns. And while we do know that our hearts really 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 pour out to the people
mm,
of Palestine, we also need to make sure that we are taken care of. And it's not compulsory for you to actually expose yourself to all those videos and things. We know it's difficult, but different people have different capacities. So we need to take what's within our stride and not put so much of pressure on us to actually do to actually expose ourselves to it, because
mm,
um, by sometimes stimulation causes an impact, and it can have a traumatic impact. I often find myself doing BWRT
mm.
specifically on these events that have happened. So uh, there are other ways to keep ourselves informed, um, and we don't always need that stimulus. So whatever it is, we should also take care of ourselves, so that when we are in that situation where we are making our dua, whatever it may be, we are able to do so um, efficiently and effectively.
When it comes to mental health, and it's very different to when we're seeking other medical help. I mean, if we have a toothache, we'll go to a dentist. If we have a bodily pain, we easily go to a doctor and make a doctor's appointment. But when it comes to mental health issues, or we're having a panic attack, or we're having a mental breakdown, it takes us a little longer to accept the fact that we need help. And I'm not sure if things are, with Generation Z, I'm not sure if things have changed, but I found many women in the past, would it would be easier for women to seek mental health assistance compared to men. Has that changed?
So it definitely still is a thing, but what that means that we also have to acknowledge the change that has been evident, and men have also progressed in terms of seeking mental health support.
Mm,
The main thing that we need to look at is, while it's fact that more females or more women seek mental health help as compared to men, we also have to look at the amount of women that there are in the world. There are more women than men, so automatically there would be more women seeking help out there. But we also have to look at it in terms of percentages and look at it in proportion to each other. So, for example, if we don't always look at more women, but we look at the percentages. So, for example, 80% of women seek mental health help versus 20% of men. Um, with that being said, if you have to look at stats in the past, maybe 5 years, 10 years, there would definitely be more less men that actually
mm,
seek mental health support and help as compared to now. So there's been gradual increase over the years, and as difficult as it is,
mm,
uh, progress is still being made, and obviously more men need to come forward and more women need to be supportive of men also seeking help. We often look at it from a point of view where men don't seek mental health help, and women are the only ones that do that. However, we also see women that are shying away from mental health help, and they 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 have difficulties in terms of parenting, in terms of their relationship with their
mm,
spouses, parents, colleagues, but they still don't seek mental health help. So that support is still that support is still needed, but that stigma around mental health is not only specifically related to men; it's for human beings.
mm.
So yeah.
Yeah, 100%. I think societal norms and expectation impact the willingness to, seek help. What would you say is one of the common challenges that you're seeing today?
Okay, so there's so many actually, right?
Mm,
But let's look at it from an interactional point of view. Think of it like a circle, right? You're
mm,
driving on this road, and eventually you choose to take a turn, right? And this turn here, you don't know where it's going to go. However, this turn here just links up to the road that you're currently on, and you go round and round and round, right? So think of it like, as we know, generational trauma is real. Yes, a lot of things do come in from childhood, and trauma gets passed on from generation to generation,
mm,
and eventually, we got to. It has to stop at some point, right? But that trauma doesn't only affect you as an individual; it affects the your children, it affects your husband, and it just
mm,
goes on and on and on. So the most common things I would see is, so apart from, I'm gonna remove the traumatic events that are specifically related to maybe hijackings or um, you know, not necessarily death. We'll include death shortly, but uh, those temporary ones that just happen. It's a once-off thing, and
okay.
people don't really get exposed to it later on. So hijacking, shootings, robberies, those type of things, I'm going to exclude that for now. But common things when you look at relationships, let's look at relationships between husband and wife. You have a couple that decides, okay, well, we're in love and now we're ready, we want to get married,
Mm, mm,
and they end up getting married, and the dating phase, everything's going so well, it's all hunky-dory. They're the apple of each other's eyes, and whatever it may be.
yeah.
But as time goes by, you start living with this person, and this person, your partner, your spouse, brings out uh, traits and qualities in you that you never imagined that you're going to have. And then you're
Triggers.
sitting there and you're like, wow, I shouldn't get married. So I try to refrain from using words like triggers and
Mm,
those type
okay.
of things, because at the end of the day, it's still a stimulus. A stimulus is
Stimulus.
there, right?
Mm,
um, so something stimulates a response. Let's put it that way there. Something
okay.
stimulates a response. Perhaps he never answered your call, and yeah, I mean, he came home late or she came home late, whatever it may be.
Mm,
And now your spouse or your partner gets back, and you're like, yeah, you never answered my call. This is what's going on. I was trying 100 times to phone. How could you not do it? And a fight just will start from that. We need to think, where does this actually come from? Where
mm,
does it come from? There's a lot that goes into it, and we need to be aware of it. And it's not about that phone call that wasn't answered. It was
mm,
about the feeling uh, that you as an individual actually felt, the
mm,
feeling that you experienced, and that feeling was probably there somewhere in life, but we need to understand what are the actual needs. And
mm,
that's where all these difficulty a lot of the difficulties start off with, and it may seem insignificant, or it may seem small, but in actual fact it's not. So our partners bring out responses in us that we never imagined that we'll have. And from there, we either express ourselves effectively. Firstly, we need to identify what's our need, and if we're unable to identify our need, we will be unable to express our need effectively. So the need will be expressed, but it will be ineffective.
mm,
The need may have been to receive some comfort, some reassurance,
mm,
just a basic communication. But because we're unable to identify the need effectively, our expression of the need is going to be ineffective. If we are unable to identify the emotion within ourselves, then unfortunately we are not going to be able to express that emotion effectively either. And from there, that circle, remember that road I told you about? We just go over and over and over again, and eventually that becomes like our normal response. And you find couples that are living like that for 30, 40 years or so. You see that happening. I've got couples that are married for 30 years plus actually, and in the past I've seen it. I always advocate for it. Sometimes couples that actually come to me and they tell me, what, but this is how it's been for the rest of my life.
Mm.
For the longest time, this is how I remember it to be. And if only I recognized this here early on, if only we worked on this early on. But it's okay. Look, they are there, and that's the important thing is it's not about how long they married or whatever, but how much courage it actually takes someone that's been married for such a long time to come through and say, you know what, we need help. Can you assist us? And that is what I actually admire. But apart from that, the issues that we then have as a relationship, in the relationship then falls down to our kids. And our kids
Mm.
grow up in this environment. And sometimes we often say, not sometimes, we often say, let's not stay in this let's stay in this relationship. And the only reason I'm here is because of kids, because of the kids. The children need me.
Mm.
And they need both parents. But sometimes more harm is actually done. And then
Mm.
I tell couples that the purpose of marriage therapy is, or couples therapy is not to make or break the relationship. The purpose of couples therapy is to give the couples what is best for them. And sometimes separation is best, while other times, a reconciliation is best. So we need to look at it uh, from a holistic point of view and an open mind. And one of the things that hinder overall couples is trauma. So trauma in their marriage, trauma in their past life, trauma referring to childhood trauma, trauma with their parents, with themselves, with past relationships. All those elements build up together, and it eventually just compacts on each other until it becomes so hard. And when you need to press, there's nothing that there to actually press. So you're pressing something hard, and that's actually quite painful. And that's what our partners sometimes bring up in us.
To before we shift the conversation a little bit, how can we as a community reduce the stigma and encourage people seeking mental health?
So firstly, I think we need to know what is a psychologist and what is mental health. When you hear the term psychologist in the past and up till now, you still hear people saying, no, it's mad. It's people that are mad and you work with mad people. It's a very shallow way of looking at
Mm.
things simply because that's not what we do. There are patients that experience mental breakdowns, psychotic episodes, but um, those are all events that, well, I wouldn't say events, but the symptoms that they experience, there's a reason for it. They never decided one day just to wake up and say, "Hey, listen, I'm going to be a depressed person today, or I'm going to be schizophrenic today." They never decided that. That's not something that they chose. So
Mm.
those difficulties and mental illnesses, as well as mental health difficulties that they've experienced, it's all from Allah Subhanahu wa Taala. Allah Taala has given them this. And we often look at it and say, well, no, you know what? The reason they got it is because they aren't spiritual enough. Now, I spend my life doing research on, the impact of culture and religion, the impact of culture on religion and mental health, and exploring where did all these things start. And there's nowhere in Islam that says, you know what,
Mm.
you're gonna if you are not a good Muslim, then obviously in quotation marks, if you're not a good Muslim, then you're going to experience depression. I haven't come across that.
Mm.
How do we gauge what is a good Muslim? Who are we to say whether the next person is a good Muslim or not, right? But when we look at promoting mental health, we need to understand that these mental health illnesses and mental health challenges and difficulties and events and episodes in our life happen for a specific reason, and no one has guaranteed that they will not experience that. A couple of years ago, you'd look at the stats, it would say one in every five South Africans, so one in every four South Africans experience depression. Now it may be one in every three if you really look at it. So We need to be mindful that these things are happening all the time and we need to adapt to it. So we need to familiarize ourselves with what is mental health and what is a psychologist and how to seek help. Then we look at influential people such as ulama and even teachers. And ulama and teachers need to start speaking a lot more about it. I recall, and I speak openly about this here, and I recall going to a masjid some time back, and a few of our colleagues asked, well, we speak, and we go to the masjid, and we are the imam saying, I was there for the entire lecture, so yeah, I'm not interpreting it out of context, that as Muslims, we don't need psychologists and psychiatrists, and we don't need this medication, and we don't need it. We need to just strengthen our relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, my question is, and I got quite upset in that lecture, and my question was, a person is struggling with cancer or even the normal flu. Are you going to tell the person the same thing? Just because you cannot physically
Mm,
see it, because you don't have the lens for it, that does not mean that it's not there. Depression has no face. It really has no face. So I think our lack of responsibility in terms of accepting our downfall in our own community and the impact that we have on our community members, on our family members, that is something that we don't take responsibility for. And I recall a couple of years ago, I was still studying, and this one individual called me, and he's like, my daughter is going through this. So I said, based on, look, I was still studying. I never knew much at the time. I was probably in my undergrad years. I was in my second or third year. And I told him, look, based on what you're telling me, this sounds like a psychotic episode. So I suggest that you take your loved one to the nearest hospital. If you can't get an appointment with a psychologist for an evaluation, because it's quite urgent, please take it to the nearest hospital. Take your loved one there. I'm sure
mm,
uh, she'd appreciate it. And the person tells me, but how can I take my loved one there? Because when people come and visit, that's the daughter, when people come and
mm,
visit, I can't tell them that she's in a mental institute or in a madhouse.
mm.
I said, I was quite upset, and I'm quite vocal. I mean, I've always been vocal. And I told this individual, is that how much you love your daughter, to restrain her and restrict her from actually accessing help? And I mean, that was the last time the individual spoke to me until a few years later, where his daughter actually got help. And alhamdulillah, things have
Alhamdulillah.
progressed. And the reason that happened was it was continuously playing in his head. So, with my frustration at the time and passion, it took a bit later, but ended up getting help. But that's a perception that we have. And the biggest thing he says, and he tells me, he says, Hafiz, whatever you do, I need you to tell people the stories. I said, what do you mean? So he says, tell them that how naive I was, as old as I am, how naive I was, that I chose not to look at it, and because of that, my daughter got worse. And it took a youngster to
Mm,
to help me realize that I'm not doing what I need to do as a father. As an old person, when I say old, I mean I won't give the person's age, but person is quite old, So it was quite uplifting to see that
mm.
happening, and we need to be more open about it. We need to talk more openly about it. We need to educate our elders about it, that it's not just a made up thing. Our brain is real, and our
Yes,
brain
definitely.
also feels.
Definitely. I think we just have to break the cycle. And I think the more we talk about it, the more awareness we spread. What inspired you, to create such a workshop for new couples?
The main thing is that we often see couples that are sometimes married for 6 months, sometimes even 2, 3 months, sometimes married
Mm,
for years, that they come through and they're on the verge of a divorce. They often come through and they're on the verge of the divorce. I applaud those that come through when they aren't on the verge of the divorce, or when they really something going on. But just to improve themselves. But they often come through when it's too late for them. uh, for us, inshallah, we work with what we have. But for them, they often feel, no, there's nothing more I can do. And sometimes people just push through and push through and push through, and then realize, well, I don't actually want this. I can't commit to it. So that inconsistency in terms of people's understanding of themselves as well as what marriage is. Along with that, so I no longer work with children, but when I used to work with children, a lot of the times we often work with the couples that are involved in there. uh, the mom and dad are the focal point, and sometimes we
Mm,
refer the parents for couples counseling, and the child comes right. So all those, I'd
mm,
say, discrepancies that happen along the lines, and we notice loopholes specifically in relation to our Indian culture, our Indian people, our Muslim people as well. It's specifically we see that they just shy away and they don't talk about their difficulties until it boils and boils and boils, and eventually they burn. So we said, what can we do? Mumtaz and I always wanted to do this. Yeah, well, I always wanted to do it. And then eventually I met Mumtaz and I'm like, well, Mumtaz, come, why don't we do something around this? And she was in agreement with me. And I said, well, we've got the male, we've got the female, and let's get ulama in there as well. And we've got, alhamdulillah, an alim, Mullah Muhammad Salim Saruji, he'll also be joining us. And we said, how can we help couples and help individuals understand what mental health is and how that's actually impacting their relationship. So, as I mentioned earlier on, in terms of the patterns of behavior, that communication, the effective communication versus ineffective communication, identifying of needs, understanding ourselves, understanding our emotions, and along with that, a gender perspective on emotional health and mental health. So, where the husband thinks, well, he needs to be the strong macho man, and the woman feels that, you know what, I need to be submissive, and whatever my husband says I've got to do, and I'm not allowed to have a say. Along with that, we look at the emotional impact on children. And so our patterns of behavior, our interactional patterns of behavior, how is that impacting our systems, our
mm,
families? How do we love ourselves? How much do we love ourselves? How do we love ourselves? um, if we are unable to love ourselves, how would we be able to love someone else? And I often say that
mm,
people spend so much of money on weddings and events building up to the wedding, which I don't have a
mm,
problem with that. I really don't have a problem in that. Alhamdulillah, if Allah Ta'ala has blessed you, by all means, go for it. But how much do we spend, or how much are we willing to invest on our relationship? That premarital counseling that
mm,
will not only last for
mm.
that moment, but the lifetime, literally that lifetime, it would last for. It'd be things that you take from there going forward. How do we actually equate a price to happiness? And that is the biggest question. So Mumtaz and I got together and said, well, you know what, let's address this. Let's see how we could actually help people uh, improve their relationships, improve themselves, understand how to communicate their needs effectively, where the husband also knows, you know what, in terms of emotions, the wife knows emotions. They know how to manage themselves, they know how to manage their emotions, they have a lot more information and education on it. Along with that, we aim to introduce a lot of practical elements to it, bonding activities. And when I say practical, it's not going to be a seminar, a lecture, where there's going to be slides and everything. You are going to be working. It's not therapy, but it's enhancing that closeness, that understanding, that emotional connection, in overall, the connection.
So it's something really to look forward to. And like we said, this is a premarital workshop for young couples. It can also educate them into dealing with what young couples can obviously be prepared to navigate through the early stages of marriage. And it's not only for new couples as well as the old generation, those who are married,
Yes.
grandparents for how many years, and they need to rekindle their love. Would be interesting to see older couples as well come through and work at it, because like you said, it's an investment. So what is it that couples can gain and learn and take with them from your
So
workshop?
before we get to that, there's something that just crossed my mind. We are focusing a lot on
Mm,
on couples workshop. This workshop is not only for couples; it's also for singles. So those of you who are looking to get married, what to look for in a spouse, how to understand yourself better, how to understand your needs, how to recognize your needs, how to express your needs, how to recognize if you even have trauma there. So couples can also experience the exact same thing in terms of how to recognize, do I have trauma lingering around, and how is this trauma impacting my relationship, and what can I do about it? The main thing is, what can I do about it? Couples can also gain knowledge on understanding their emotions, understanding how their partner reacts to them, why their partner reacts in that particular way, how to react in a more effective manner, how to communicate in a manner which does not come as an attack, but rather as uh, as a conversation. Because the moment we start attacking, or the moment we recognize, the moment we are angry, the moment we are frustrated, automatically our tone changes, our word usage changes. So when that happens, we then fall into this pattern of conflict. And when this conflict arises, we don't know how to deal with conflict. And when we don't know how to deal with conflict, we often have different perceptions of how we were exposed to dealing with difficulties and problems, and we think that is the only way. So our brain only sees one particular way to do it. Sometimes generalizing here, but sometimes I'm only going to remain quiet. I'm going to be completely submissive. I'll be quiet. And other times I have to fight. I have to fight. I have to fight. I have to make my point heard. I need to be considered. I need to be heard. And the only way to do it is by fighting. So all those things are ineffective. And then because of that, we go again into that pattern of behavior. And whenever there's a difficulties, then that's where we are. And as a result, our families are affected. It could from our children to our parents to our workers. It's a ripple effect, and this pattern of behavior just shadows from one context to the next context.
So basically, it's for individuals as well who are basically learning to find out about themselves. What are they looking forward to in finding the perfect partner? It's not about a checklist about what does your partner have. It's about more finding out who you
Mhm.
are
I wouldn't say
for your
perfect partner.
partner,
I'd say the
inshallah.
partner
So,
that they desire.
Brother Mohammed, what advice do you have for individuals, couples, whoever's attending, before they embark on this journey together?
What advice do I have to them? The main thing is learn about yourself, know more about you. If you don't know about you, how do you expect to just invest in a whole new human being that's going to come in? So give yourself that time, give yourself that energy, give yourself that compassion, recognize your strengths and your weaknesses. And when I say recognize strengths and weaknesses, I don't mean intellectualize it. Oh, I'm good at this, or I'm not good at this, but reflect on a deeper level. How would you potentially contribute to the downfall of your marriage? How are you potentially contributing to the downfall of your marriage or to the discord? How are you contributing to your marriage thriving? To understand, because if we don't know our weakness, how do we make it a strength? And if we have a strength, how do we make it better? So all those things, I'd say, reflect on. It's something that you can get also from the workshop, but give yourself the time, give yourself that understanding. There's no rush for these things. You rather take the time out and understand yourself than to get into something and later on say, well, this is not what I signed up for. I don't have the capacity. I don't want to use my capacity to sort this out, and they end up completely leaving the entire marriage. So I know what I'm going to say is quite controversial next, but don't get married if you don't want to, if you want to expect everything that is blissful all the time, and if you don't want to invest in yourself and in your marriage, rather don't get married then, because it is all about investment. It is about investment. If you're unwilling to put that effort in the marriage, then rather hold back, because the repercussions that can come from there is far more worse than if you've given yourself that time.
Wow, definitely, I agree with you there. And then, so Brother Mohammed, talking about the workshop, what else can we look forward to, and how does one go about booking a seat?
Maulana Mohammed Salim Saluji is an alim, and he works extensively with social work and a lot of outreach and so forth. And Sister Adla Dadabai, she's an educational psychologist that works extensively with children. So obviously, it's going to be breathtaking. It's going to be mind blowing in terms of the practical resources, the skills that one could develop from this particular workshop. But on top of that, it's also see it as an outing as well for you and your couple. You don't have to worry about any food or anything of that sort. All you do is you just come as you are. with your spouse or alone, whatever it may be. All meals and things would be taken care of. Regarding the the location and the venue is actually going to be changing. I know the ad says it's on rooftop, it's at rooftop, but due to the demand, we've
Mhm.
now actually acquired a new spot that, and we're blending the Indian culture, specifically the Indian culture, in this entire workshop, just to make it a lot more eventful and a
Okay.
lot more appeasing. So one of my couples that I'm actually working with said, you know what, well, why don't we include the Indian culture in it? So I said, well, why not? Let's go for it. And yeah, we decided let's change the venue now. So yeah, just keep an eye out on our social media platforms in terms of the bookings. There is a number on there,
Okay.
062 564 6981. So that's a number that they can link up for bookings. Alternatively, they can find myself and Mumtaz on social media. It's at Soulful Psychology Mo, and it's Mumtaz Kaji is at Safe Space Psychology. So yeah, you can reach out to us on our social media platforms, and we gradually, gently assist you guys throughout the process, um,
Mhm.
in terms of registration and so forth.
Psychology has a lot to do in the Quran. I mean, our Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam has taught us a lot about psychology, and in the Quran, there is a lot of psychology, and we all look to the Quran for inspiration every day on the daily basis. And you being Hafizul Quran, mashallah, what what would you say is your go-to ayat or your inspirational surah that you go to on a daily basis to find that inspiration?
So, there's so many of them, but nonetheless, the verse that I actually that resonates not only with me but for my practice is in para 26 surah Hujarat. Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu ijtanibu kathiran min adh-dhann, and the ayat goes on. And why this is my favorite verse, because in a nutshell, this is obviously to me, right? And Allah Ta'ala says, do not judge, do not backbite, do not slander, because by doing that is like eating the flesh of your decaying brother. And I encompass my practice around this verse specifically. An uncle actually, uh, one of my uncles brought awareness to this verse, and it was so profound, because when you look at psychology, people often think that, we are we're going to speak about each other's stories out there and so forth, not understanding the element of confidentiality that we all bound to as psychologists. But apart from ethics and confidentiality and so forth, this is what the Quran is telling us. And the Quran is saying, you know do
Mm,
not judge, do not backbite, do not make assumptions, because by doing that, you're eating the flesh of your decaying brother. And by doing that, imagine, I mean, you can eat everything. You eat the rotten fruit, no problems. You'll get a bit sick here and there. But the moment you eat decaying meat, it's finished.
mm,
I mean, you know the impact that that will have. You can die. So on that
mm,
note, that's one of my favorite verses in the Quran, because not only does it keep me in check, but it also, as psychologists, we don't judge people. We really do not judge. We there as a non-bias. So our job is not to judge. We don't make assumptions either. We actually remove assumptions. And lastly, we don't backbite. Whatever happens in that session stays in that session. And that's why that is my favorite verse.
Zakla for sharing that bit of advice. May we all practice upon that. And Brother Mohammed, just in closing, a few words regarding your workshop in
In
future.
future, there's a lot coming up. Keep an eye out on our social media platforms. But currently, apart from the workshop, we've also got an online support group for Muslim men that are grieving. This is between myself and a colleague of mine. So we've decided, look, there's a demand for Muslim men in terms of mental health as well. But apart from that, it's also grief. We don't often experience the grief, and as soon as someone passes away, the first thing we like grant you the marhum Jannat, Allah make it easy for you. And after 3 days, we must keep quiet, carry on with our life, and continue. And that's not how it actually is. There's a 3 days is for
Mm.
something else. The emotion, you can't expect emotion just to be there for 3 days and it's going to be okay. And we often think we're not allowed to feel. So, along with that, we bring in the support group, because navigating grief can be difficult, but we're also doing it online, and it would be in the evening. So, it would help after work and so forth, where people don't have to stress, take out time of work to come through to the support group, and there's a sense of safety and unity, uh, and also just to interact with other people who have also lost their loved ones, but on a psychological level. So that's the next thing that we currently have in. We're starting actually from tomorrow. It will be on every Wednesday of the month, and we'll go forward with that. However, apart from that, there'll be a lot of other workshops and things that we do have planned. Alhamdulillah, the response of this workshop has been phenomenal. So due to that, we said, you know what, however much we can help, uh, not only human beings but also the ummah, the Muslims in this country, let's try and help them. In the past, it wasn't there. We never had access to these things. So if we have to do catch up, no problem, we do it.
Very much needed in the community. Looking forward to everything, and inshallah, there'll be success in khair. And wish you all the best. Jazakallah so much for making the time.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
What we want is what we find. Power lives inside our mind.